On a rainy evening in a dark, dense forest, you hear the crunch of branches. Your heart starts beating faster. You're afraid to look in the direction of the sound, but you're still slowly turning your head. A feeling of horror freezes you. You can't escape, and you're sure that some animal is looking at you now. By this point, it stopped raining. An ominous silence has fallen over the forest. The clouds disperse, and the dim light from the full moon illuminates the trees, among which you notice a human silhouette. He's tall and is hiding in the shadows. He isn't moving, waiting for your next actions. Two glowing red eyes light up his dark face. Terrified, you point the flashlight beam at the monster. The scary creature opens its wide wings and flies away into the night. You've just seen the Mothman, one of America's most famous monsters. This is an urban legend, but the monster really exists and doesn't exist at the same time. It all started in West Virginia, in the small town of Point Pleasant in the early 20th century. It was an industrial place with factories producing harmful toxic substances. Closer to the 50s, all these plants were closed, but people didn't dispose of waste from the factories properly. Therefore, harmful substances began to penetrate the surrounding nature and pollute forests and water. These events became a prologue to the appearance of the Mothman. For the first time, city residents heard about the monster in the 60s. 4 young people were driving past the dark forest and stopped by a local power plant. There, they saw a big man with red eyes and wide wings, like those of a moth. The teenagers were terrified and immediately drove away from that place. They came to the local sheriff and told him everything that had happened. The police quickly examined the forest and the area near the station, searching for the monster, but found nothing. Meanwhile, a local newspaper wrote an article about it. Soon, other people also began to report that they had seen a mysterious creature. Some thought the Mothman was a human or an animal that mutated after getting poisoned by toxic substances. These rumors were nothing but fairy tales from sci-fi movies. So, people started ignoring these stories after a while. Then, after the monster's first appearance, a catastrophe happened in the city. The Silver Bridge, the main road to Point Pleasant, couldn't withstand the traffic before the winter holidays. The bridge collapsed under the heavy weight and many cars fell down. The tragedy brought a lot of grief to the town, and people were trying to figure out how could this happen. Some suggested that the crash could be related to the Mothman. No, he didn't destroy the bridge, but people said they had seen this creature many times before the tragedy. It looked like the Mothman was a harbinger of trouble. Further investigation revealed that the road collapsed because of poor bridge maintenance. But this version faded amid the rumors about the Mothman. After the crash, reports about the Mothman stopped. People no longer saw the monster and forgot about it. But then, in the 70s, author John Keel wrote a book about the mysterious monster from Point Pleasant. He liked discussing stories about extraterrestrial civilizations and other urban legends, so he couldn't miss the case of the Mothman. He wrote about how the unknown beast could be an unconscious premonition of Point Pleasant's inhabitants of the tragedy on the bridge. The book became popular all over the US. John Keel made the Mothman a superstar. Hollywood created a movie based on the book, and the small town became the center of attraction for thousands of tourists. The Mothman has become as popular as the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. People organize an annual festival in honor of this character. If earlier the beast was a harbinger of disaster, now it's become the cause of the economic growth of Point Pleasant. Tourists come to get in touch with the legend and spend a lot of money. Locals open cafes and hotels, organize tours, and make souvenirs. One sculptor even installed a sinister monster statue. The Mothman has evolved from local myth to a brand. In this case, it turns out that even though he doesn't exist, it's not entirely true. Many messages about the Mothman appear all over the world. It's said that people see him shortly before major disasters, but of course, it's yet to be proven. One guy did research and found out that all the books and materials about the Mothman were written by fans of myths and urban legends, and that there was not a single scientific proof or observation that the monster really existed. Now, remember the events associated with the Mothman? The collapse of the bridge? The release of toxic substances and other tragedies? The flying creature with red eyes has become the embodiment of mass hysteria. When many people are under stress or grief, they may experience the same unconscious reaction. In such a depressed state, people really begin to believe and see things that don't exist. A similar feeling appears during a strike or other mass events. You may disagree with the majority opinion, but when you find yourself in a crowd that demands something, you seem to be infected by their mood. This is quite a typical thing for our mentality. When you're experiencing grief along with hundreds and thousands of people around, your brain becomes sensitive to any information. You may see a large heron or an owl in this state and mistake it for the Mothman. And other people will unknowingly support you and believe in the monster. There have been many cases of mass hysteria in the world. One of the most striking ones happened in France in the 16th century when the inhabitants of Strasbourg began to dance for several weeks. This event is called the Dancing Plague. At first, one woman started dancing in the city's central square. A week later, other locals joined her, infected with her bout of sinister fun. According to one version, the mass dancing hysteria began against a backdrop of hunger and diseases that Europe was experiencing at that time. People were under constant stress, and their minds decided to relieve stress in an unusual way. Another version says that people were poisoned by some fungus that grew on wheat grains. The fungus somehow affected people's psyche and made them dance. But let's get back to our monster. In addition to the stress associated with the collapse of the bridge and the release of toxic waste in the forest, people could have been impressed by herons and owls. People called the Mothman bird-like in the first reports because of his red eyes and wings. Therefore, some researchers claimed that the residents of Point Pleasant had seen a big heron or a sandhill crane with wide wings and red markings around the eyes. The sandhill crane doesn't live in West Virginia, but it can fly over this territory and even make a stop there to have a snack. Also, people could have seen a giant owl sitting in a tree. The eyes of these animals can glow red at night. People reported seeing about 28 cranes from 2017 to 2019. Imagine living in a city where shops, streets, and monuments remind you of the Mothman. People have been talking about him for years, believing in him. And then you see a giant heron in the forest. Surely the first thing you'll think about is the Mothman. So people may be telling the truth when they say they've seen him, or at least they might believe they're telling the truth. In any case, the Mothman is neither a product of an extraterrestrial civilization, nor a radioactive mutant animal. People created this creature with their minds and faith. Such things always attract people because they give us the feeling that we know something that most people don't. Something mysterious. Additionally, the Mothman brings a lot of money to the residents of Point Pleasant, and it's much more profitable for them to support the rumors about the monster than to prove that it doesn't exist.
Welcome to the Hall of Monsters. I see you are wearing your protective gear. That's good because during your visit here, your safety is not guaranteed. So, every step you take, beware, for the monsters you'll see ahead are the scariest ones from Japanese folktales. If they don't haunt you during your visit, they sure will haunt your dreams. And let me tell you, no anime you have watched could have prepared you for this. I already see doubt and fear in your eyes. So let's begin our tour before you lose that little flicker of courage left within you. There's no better monster to greet you than the Naparabo. You might not notice it, but it is happy to have new victims. I mean visitors. Naparabo looks like an ordinary human being in almost every way. That is why it can blend in seamlessly with human society. But things will quickly get uncanny once you meet face to face with it. You see, it has no face at all. Its head is like a blank orb. But here's the thing, Naparabo is quite harmless. It only frightens people, that's it. In legends and stories, it usually does that by impersonating someone familiar to its potential victims. And once it has their attention, it causes its features to disappear, almost as if erasing a pencil drawing. What is left is a blank, smooth sheet of skin with no eyes, nose, or mouth. So, as you might have imagined, its true identity and what it really looks like is unknown. One of the stories in which Naparabo appears is about a lazy fisherman. Despite his wife's warnings, he goes fishing from a sacred imperial koi pond. On his way there, he meets another fisherman who also warns him not to go there. Still, he ignores him. Once he arrives at the pond, a beautiful young woman begs him not to fish there. But he doesn't listen to her either. That is when she wipes off her face. When the fisherman runs home to hide with fear, his wife confronts him and criticizes him for his wrongdoing. Plot twist, only to wipe her face as well. Speaking of fish and ponds, let's move on to Cup Fa. Don't fall for their rather funny and mascot-like appearance. Cup Fa is a dangerous monster you wouldn't want to cross paths with. These creatures, which are often depicted as humanoid turtles, live in and around water bodies such as lakes, ponds, or rivers. Cup Fas are generally the size of a human child, yet they are physically stronger than a grown man. Their skin color can vary from different shades of green to bright red and even blue. In addition, they can either be slimy or covered in scales. As unique as each Cup Fa can be, they all have a turtle shell on their back and a mouth resembling a beak. Their arms and legs are webbed between the toes and fingers, but the most characteristic part of their appearance is the bowl-like objects that lie on top of their skulls. This is considered to be the source of Cup Fa's power and life force, and must be kept filled with water at all times. If this water spills or the bowl is damaged in any way, a Cup Fa can become incredibly weakened and will be unable to move. Cup Fas are known to cause mischief. Although they can befriend humans, you should always approach one with caution, because they might try to lure you into the water to feed on you. However, there's also a chance they might challenge you to a sumo wrestling match. Just know that they are really good at it before accepting this challenge. Yet again, if you do find yourself in a match, here's a pro tip. Find a way to trick the Cup Fa into bowing so low that the water in its dish spills out. And hey, if you refill that water later, you can bring the creature under your command. Take a look at this lady here. She seems to be sleeping peacefully, right? Well, look again. There's something strange going on with her neck. Rokurokubi might appear as an ordinary woman by day, but when it's nighttime and her body is asleep, her neck stretches to incredible lengths and roams around freely. Although Rokurokubi is no less creepy than the other creatures, there is something that makes her different. It is that, unlike others, she is actually not born as a monster. She used to be a human being just like us, but she was transformed by a curse resulting from some evil action or misdeed. But the story gets sadder, because the mentioned misdeed doesn't necessarily have to be her own doing. In many cases, it is either Rokurokubi's husband or father who actually committed evil actions. But she's the one paying the price because the curse only affects women. If you think Rokurokubi cannot be that harmful or scary with that heartbreaking backstory, then you're right. Her head might attack small animals sometimes, or she might cause mischief by scaring nearby people. But that's mostly it. What she loves to do in her night travels, however, is to lick up lamp oil with her long tongue. Well, who are we to judge someone's favorite food? Nukakubi is Rokurokubi's much scarier sister. She is like an advanced version of her, sort of like an upgraded Pokemon. While Rokurokubi's head is always attached to her body, Nukakubi's head can come off from the neck and float around far and away from her body. The worst part is, though, she can get bloodthirsty sometimes, and that's when her detached head will start preying on humans to quench that thirst. However, she is not invincible. It is believed that if her body moves by any chance while it is sleeping, and her head is still floating around as that happens, then her head cannot return back to the body. Hope that comforts you a bit. You see a roll of cotton. I see a life-threatening monster. According to Japanese folktales, especially the myth of Tsukumogami, inanimate objects receive a soul, therefore become alive and self-aware after serving their owners for 100 years. Although they are usually harmless, they might tend to play small pranks on people. Yet again, they still have the capacity to get angry and vengeful, especially if there are people who threw them away or didn't treat them well. They might group up to take revenge. Ittan Momen is one of those object monsters. These possessed long and narrow sheets of cloth which were used to make clothes can be seen flying through the night sky. They are often malicious and attack people by wrapping their bodies around a person's face and neck, strangling or smothering them. In some tales, it is said that wrapped cloths would spin around and quickly come flying to wrap themselves around people and take them away to the skies. Joker's laughter is gonna sound like music to your ears once you hear this lady's. Waruhion is a female-looking monster that lives in the mountains, but despite her non-threatening appearance, meeting one will actually put you in a really dangerous position. She will smile and start laughing at you, and once she does, you'll realize that her laughter is somewhat toxic and infectious. It will cause you to start laughing along too, but even if she leaves, you will continue laughing after her until you are out of breath and unable to stand. Even if you were strong enough to resist laughing along with her, you would still not be safe. You see, merely hearing her laughter, no matter how far away she cackles, is enough to put you in a stupor. You'll be haunted by that annoying and ear-piercing sound wherever you go, for the rest of your life. However, it's not like anybody who travels through the mountains will meet her. There is one way to avoid this laughing curse altogether. You see, she appears to people only on the 1st, 9th, and 17th day of each month. So, plan your travels accordingly.
In the past 30 years, scientists have made an incredible discovery of a new creature living deep beneath the surface of the ocean, and the name of the creature is the harp sponge. Now, if you're wondering why it took so long to come across this animal, then I might have the answer. These creatures typically hang out at a depth of roughly 11,100 feet beneath the ocean's waves. This sponge species was first discovered off the coast of California thanks to a robot that was sturdy enough to explore those crazy depths the ocean has to offer. This is no doubt an area of the planet where even the most benign-looking creatures can be potentially dangerous. But even scientists were surprised to find that this creature was more than just a sponge. Now, this might seem obvious, but the harp sponge got its name because its basic structure, referred to as a vein, is the same shape as a harp. Each vein is made up of a horizontal branch supporting several parallel vertical branches. But don't let the harp sponge's fanciful and amusing appearance or its non-intimidating name fool you. Yeah, the harp sponge is very much a deep-sea hunter. It has a unique ability to capture and envelop small animals using its rhizoids, short, thin fibers. With their help, the harp sponge clings on to the soft, muddy bottom and catches tiny creatures that get swept into its branches by deep-sea currents. Uh-oh. Other sponge creatures often feed by pulling bacteria and bits of organic matter from the seawater and filtering them through their bodies. But not our harp sponge. Instead, it snatches its future meal with minuscule barbed hooks that cover each of the harp sponge's branches. Now, harp sponges prefer tiny crustaceans like crabs, crayfish, shrimps, and prawns. Once the harp sponge has one of them in its clutches, it envelops the animal in a thin membrane before slowly beginning to digest it. So, pal, what's eating you? Oh, Harpo? Too bad. Researchers believe that harp sponges use this method of feeding because there aren't enough nutrients that deep down. This makes traditional filter feeding less effective. Research has shown that the creature is still in the process of evolving. Early harp sponges researchers found only had 2 veins, but later scientists discovered other harp sponges that had 6 veins. The harp sponge might have evolved this elaborate candle holder-like structure to increase its surface area. In general, harp sponges typically grow up to a length of 1 foot, but researchers have seen a creature that was 2 feet in length. The harp sponge is not only very unusual, but also beautiful to look at. See those tiny white balls on top of the branches? Now, why don't we look at some other creatures that live below the photic zone of Earth's oceans? The photic zone means the area beneath the ocean's surface that still receives some sunlight. Thanks to this, there are loads of different creatures and organisms living there. Any animal living beyond this layer qualifies as a deep-sea creature. The Tomopterus worm is a segmented worm you can find in the twilight zone of the ocean. This is the area that lies between 650 and 3,300 feet beneath the surface. These creatures are often no more than 1 inch long, but the largest of them can grow up to 1 foot. While swimming around and feeding, these worms do what researchers describe as an amazing smooth dance. That's because the creatures can swim extremely quickly and maneuver at tight angles with ease. Now, I know most people hear the word worm and think of the common earthworm, so it's quite interesting to know there's a deep-sea worm out there that never leaves the water during its entire life. Similarly, most of us try to avoid jellyfish that either rest on the sand or sit on top of the ocean waves. This isn't the case with a cresota jelly. That's a deep-sea creature too. This beautiful jellyfish is mostly ruby red, bright orange, or electric purple. That's what helped researchers realize they had found a new species of jellyfish. The creature grows to a maximum size of 1 inch across. It has tentacles that stretch out in every direction. Now, if you come close to this jellyfish, it'll pull all these tentacles in toward its body before rapidly swimming away to avoid danger. Yes, you are dangerous. The cresota jelly is extremely rare. You won't see it very often. You might need to borrow that deep-sea diving robot I mentioned earlier. While worms and jellyfish might seem quite harmless, this isn't the case with the Pacific viperfish. Ooh. This creature is equipped with a noticeably big mouth, like me. And the needle-like teeth inside are key to its hunting strategy. Pacific viperfish live at around 5,000 feet below the ocean surface. But they're among those numerous marine animals that migrate each night from the ocean depths toward shallower waters to dine. What's on the menu for dinner tonight? Lots of small fish and shrimp. The creature can grow up to 12 inches in length. Its 2 front fangs, which stick up from the fish's bottom jaw past its own eyes, are especially dramatic. When the fish unhinges its jaw, its mouth can open wide enough to engulf smaller animals, and the teeth form a cage to prevent an escape. Now, have you ever seen an underwater creature that looks like a strawberry? Trust me, it does exist. Just look at these dots on the strawberry squid. The creature has a big eye and a smaller one. You might think this unconventional pairing would be awkward and uncomfortable, but it's actually the opposite. The big left eye looks upward. It spots shadows cast by other animals in the dimly lit waters above. The eye's tubular shape helps it collect as much light as possible. On the other side of the squid's head, you can see its right eye. It's small and looks downward. This eye searches for flashes of bioluminescence produced by animals lurking in the darker waters below. Now, bioluminescence means the production and emission of light by living organisms. By the way, the squid has a nickname. And no, it's not Squiggy, although that's a great one. It's known as the cockeyed squid. This is simply due to the remarkable difference in size between its 2 eyes. I think I like Squiggy better, and so it goes. Since light doesn't reach the deep sea, the strawberry squid's body actually looks black. This helps the creature hide from enemies, such as sharks and dolphins. In general, the strawberry squid grows to a length of 5 inches. It typically lives around 3,000 feet below the surface, but floats to shallower waters at night. Now, the feather star is a marine creature without a backbone, but with feather-like arms that radiate from the center of its body. These creatures first appeared around 200 million years ago. Related to sea stars, they look like a flower, but if you approach them, they'll quickly swim away. But not all feather stars can swim. Many species can only crawl along the bottom of the seafloor. Like some of the other deep-sea creatures we've looked at, the feather star can adapt to its surroundings. It has a creepy ability to shed its arms, the same way some lizards can shed their tails. This also helps them escape from their enemies. Feather stars live all across the globe, from the equator to the poles, from the shallow waters on top of reefs to the deep, deep sea. Now, given that we're dealing with mysterious creatures, the name of this one is quite fitting. The swift vampire squid should be the official symbol of life in the deep sea. The animal has a dark red body, huge blue eyes, and a cloak-like web that stretches between its 8 arms. This, along with its name, may suggest that the creature is some form of a terrifying hunter. In reality, though, the vampire squid is a soft-bodied, timid creature, about the size, shape, and color of a football. It grows to roughly 12 inches in length and lives 3,000 feet below the waves. There's almost no oxygen there, but also relatively few predators. I think I'll need to decompress from this one.